Selamat malam semuanya. Bang, Aika Meru dah. Selamat malam. Konbanwa. Malam. Halo. Oh, walaupun malam gini banyak yang datang juga ya. Selamat malam. Suara Meru kedengaran jelas kah? Selamat malam. You good, Meru? Yes, I am fine. Jelas? Oke, sip. Ya, kalau buat yang baru pertama kali datang ke stream, Meru sengaja ngomongnya lebih soft sih, karena kan nanti baca dongeng. Jadi kan udah malam juga. Arigato donasinya. Bentar. Jelas ya. Oke, sip. Meru nggak apa-apa kok. Cuman apa namanya? Untuk hari ini streamnya bakal spesial. Ya. Jadi streamnya bakal spesial gitu. Khusus buat bedtime story stream mulai dari sekarang sampai ke depannya. Meru bakal buka ya dengan ngobrol sama kalian dulu. Terus khusus donasi semuanya akan dibaca di akhir. Apalagi kalau misalnya nanti kalian donasinya pas di tengah-tengah Meru lagi baca cerita. Jadi baca ceritanya bakal jadi fokus utamanya Meru. Jadi apa? No. Meru didn't push herself. It's okay. Meru apa kabar? Meru baik. Berhubung waktu lagi sekarang kan lagi ngomongin kabar kan. Meru sudah sampai 10.000. Terima kasih ya semuanya atas dukungannya. Hari ini bacanya dongeng ya. Yang apa namanya? Yang horor-horor kapan-kapan. Nanti Meru akan juga buka submission buat baca cerita horor gitu ya. Jadi nggak ceritanya dari baca cerita apa nggak selalu dongeng yang Meru cari di internet gitu. Ya, arigato semuanya sudah subscribe ke Meru 10.000. Wow. Bahkan Meru baru seminggu di sini udah dapat segitu. Terima kasih ya kalian. Dan ngomong-ngomong tentang celebration 10.000, Meru udah post di community juga dan di Twitter. Kalau bakal ada celebration dengan Meru nge-raid gombal kalian. Jadi nanti itu bisa langsung diklik linknya. Nanti linknya menuju ke Google Form. Jadi nanti kalian bisa langsung isi gombalannya. Peraturannya udah ada di dalam formnya juga. Jadi tinggal tinggal isi aja. Ikuti peraturan, kalau enggak nanti dihapus yang enggak sesuai sama peraturan ya. Tentu saja nanti juga bakal difilter sama Meru, bukan sama Godric, karena Godric kan manajernya Meru. Oke. Kalau nggak jago ngomong nggak apa-apa, nanti ikutan nge-cringe sama Meru aja ya. Meru udah lihat beberapa waktu ngecek formulir dan sepertinya memang kalian benar-benar pengen itu ya, gombalnya kayaknya ada beberapa yang nyari ya di tempat yang sama ya. Oke. Ya, jadi Meru bakal bacain. Selamat malam semuanya, selamat malam. Apa namanya? Meru akan bacain 2 dongeng, dua-duanya dalam bahasa Inggris karena Meru yang lumayan panjang. Meru cuma bisa nemunya bahasa Inggris. Cuman mungkin next time Meru akan tulis dongeng sendiri kali ya. Tapi untuk hari ini Meru akan bacain yang bahasa Inggris. Jadi kalau misalnya kalian nggak ngerti, nggak apa-apa, dengerin aja. Karena tujuannya stream bedtime story ini lebih ke Meru dongengin kalian sambil biar kalian ngantuk. Karena ini juga udah malam kan. Gitu. Nggak apa-apa, dengerin aja. Udah. Terima kasih kalau kalian mikirnya bakal mimpi indah di dongengin Meru, cuman ya gitu. Ya, Meru akan mulai. Kalian udah siap? Masuk mimpi gimana caranya? Cuman Domu yang bisa. Meru mah di sini. Yang minta bonk, kenapa? Kalau menonton sambil makan nggak apa-apa. Dia jangan lupa dihabisin ya makanannya. Iya, Meru akan mulai. Volume Meru nggak apa-apa kan? Meru juga nggak bakalan bisa baca chat terus-terusan. Paling bacanya nanti di tengah waktu udah selesai dongeng pertama gitu ya. Itu nanti Meru baru baca chat lagi. Jadi Meru bakal fokus baca ceritanya ya. Aki. Nggak apa-apa ya. Oke, terima kasih semuanya. Oke. Oke, Meru akan mulai dongengnya sekarang ya. Dongeng yang pertama adalah cerita tentang a snowman who falls in love with a hot stove. Orang-orangan salju yang jatuh cinta dengan kompor. Ya. Oke. It is so delightfully cold, said the snowman, that it makes my whole body crackle. This is just the kind of wind to blow life into one. How that great red thing up there is staring at me. He meant the sun, who was just setting. It shall not make me wink. I shall manage to keep the pieces. He had 2 triangular pieces of tile in his head instead of eyes. His mouth was made of an old broken rake and was, of course, furnished with it. He had been brought into existence amidst the joyous shouts of boys, the jingling of sleigh bells, and the slashing of whips. The sun went down, and the full moon rose, large, round, and clear, shining in the deep blue. There it comes again from the other side, said the snowman, who supposed the sun was showing himself once more. Ah, I have cured him of staring, though. Now he may hang up there and shine, that I may see myself. If only I knew how to manage to move away from this place. I should so like to move. If I could, I would slide along yonder on the ice, as I have seen the boys do. But I don't understand how. I don't even know how to run. Away, away, barked the old yard dog. He was quite hoarse and could not pronounce bow wow properly. He had once been an indoor dog, and lay by the fire, and he had been hoarse ever since. The sun will make you run someday. I saw him last winter make your predecessor run, and his predecessor before him. Away, away, they all have to go. I don't understand you, comrade, said the snowman. "Is that thing up yonder to teach me how to run? I saw it running itself a little while ago, and now it has come creeping up from the other side." "You know nothing at all," replied the yard dog. "But then, you've only lately been patched up. What you see yonder is the moon, and the one before it was the sun. It will come again tomorrow, and most likely teach you to run down into the ditch by the well, for I think the weather is going to change. I can feel such pricks and stabs in my left leg. I'm sure there is going to be a change." "I don't understand him," said the snowman to himself, "but I have a feeling that he is talking of something very disagreeable. The one who stared so just now, and whom he calls the sun, is not my friend. I can feel that too." "Away, away," barked the yard dog, and then he turned around 3 times and crept into his kennels to sleep. There really was a change in the weather. Toward morning, a thick fog covered the whole country around, and a keen wind arose, so that the cold seemed to freeze one's bones. But when the sun rose, the sight was splendid. Trees and bushes were covered in hoar frost, and looked like a forest of white coral, while on every twig glittered frozen dewdrops. The many delicate forms concealed in summer by luxuriant foliage were now clearly defined, and looked like glittering lacework. From every twig glistened a white radiance. The birch, waving in the wind, looked full of life, like trees in summer, and its appearance was wondrously beautiful. And where the sun shone, how everything glittered and sparkled, as if diamond dust had been strewn about, while a snowy carpet of the earth appeared as if covered with diamonds, from which countless lights gleamed, whiter than even snow itself. "This is really beautiful," said a young girl, who had come into the garden with a young man, and they both stood still near the snowman and contemplated the glittering scene. "Summer cannot show a more beautiful sight," she exclaimed, while her eyes sparkled. "And we can have such a fellow as this in the summertime," replied the young man, pointing to the snowman. "He is capital." The girl laughed and nodded at the snowman, and then tripped away over the snow with her friend. The snow creaked and crackled beneath her feet, as if he had been treading on starch. "Who are these two?" asked the snowman of the yard dog. "You have been here longer than I have. Do you know them?" "Of course I know them," replied the yard dog. "She has stroked my back many times, and he has given me a bone of meat. I never bite those two." "But what are they?" asked the snowman. "They are lovers," he replied. "They will go and live in the same kennel by and by, and gnaw at the same bone. Away, away." "Are they the same kind of beings as you and I?" asked the snowman. "Well, they belong to the same master," retorted the yard dog. "Certainly, people who were only born yesterday know very little. I can see that in you. I have age and experience. I know everyone here in the house, and I know there was once a time when I did not lie out here in the cold, fastened to a chain." "Away, away." "The cold is delightful," said the snowman, "but do tell me, only you must not clang your chain so, for it jars all through me when you do that." "Away, away," barked the yard dog. "I'll tell you. They said I was a pretty little fellow once, Then I used to lie in a velvet-covered chair up at the master's house and sit in the mistress' lap. They used to kiss my nose and wipe my paws with an embroidered handkerchief, and I was called Emmy, dear Emmy, sweet Emmy. But after a while I grew too big for them, and they sent me away to the housekeeper's room, so I came to live on the lower story. You can look into the room where you stand and see where I was master once, for I was indeed master to the housekeeper. It was certainly a smaller room than upstairs, but I was more comfortable, for I was not being continually taken hold of and pulled about by the children as I had been. I received quite a good food, or even better, I have my own cushion, and there was a stove. It is the finest thing in the world at this season of the year. I used to go under the stove and lie down quite beneath it. Ah, I still dream of that stove. Away, away. Does a stove look beautiful? Asked the snowman. Is it at all like me? It is just the reverse of you, said the dog. It's as black as a crow, and has a long neck and a brass knob. It eats firewood so that fire spurts out of its mouth. We should keep on one side, or under it, to be comfortable. You can see it through the window, from where you stand. Then the snowman looked and saw a bright polished thing with a brazen knob, and fire gleaming from the lower part of it. The snowman felt quite a strange sensation come over him. It was very odd. He knew not what it meant, and he could not account for it. But there are people who are not men of snow, who understand what it is. And why did you leave her? Asked the snowman, for it seemed to him that the stove must be of the female sex. How could you give up such a comfortable place? I was obliged, replied the yard dog. They turned me out of doors and chained me up here. I was bitten the youngest of my master's sons in the leg, because he kicked away the bone I was gnawing. Bone for bone, I thought, but they were so angry, and from that time I have been fastened with a chain and lost my bone. Don't you hear how hoarse I am? Away, away! I can't talk anymore like other dogs. Away, away! That is the end of it all. But the snowman was no longer listening. He was looking into the housekeeper's room on the lower story, where the stove stood on its 4 iron legs, looking about the same size as the snowman himself. What a strange crackling I feel within me, he said. Shall I ever get in there? It is an innocent wish, and innocent wishes are sure to be fulfilled. I must go in there and lean against her, even if I have to break the window. You must never go in there, said the yard dog, for if you approach the stove, you'll melt away. Away. I might as well go, said the snowman, for I think I am breaking up as it is. During the whole day, the snowman stood looking in through the window, and in the twilight hour the room became still more inviting, for from the stove came a gentle glow, not like the sun or the moon. No, only the bright light which gleams from the stove when it has been well fed. When the door of the stove was opened, the flame started out of its mouth, as this is customary with all stoves. The light of the flames fell directly on the face and breast of the snowman with a ruddy gleam. I can endure it no longer, said he. How beautiful it looks when it stretched out its tongue. The night was long, but did not appear so to the snowman, who stood there enjoying his own reflection, and crackling with the snow. In the morning, the window panes of the housekeeper's room were covered with ice. They were the most beautiful ice flowers any snowman could desire, but they concealed the snow. They concealed the stove. These window panes would not thaw, and he could see nothing of the stove, which he pictured to himself as if it had been a lovely human being. The snow crackled and the wind whistled around him. It was just the kind of frosty weather a snowman might truly enjoy, but he did not enjoy it. How, indeed, could he enjoy anything when he was stove-sick? "That is a terrible disease for a snowman," said the yard dog. "I have suffered from it myself, but I got over it." "Away, away," he barked, and then he added, "The weather is going to change." And the weather did change. It began to thaw. As the warmth increased, the snowman decreased. He said nothing and made no complaint, which is a sure sign. One morning he broke and sunk down altogether, and behold, where he stood, something like a broomstick remained sticking up in the ground. It was a pole round which the boys had built him up. "Ah, I now understand why he had such great longing for the stove," said the yard dog. "Why, there's a shovel that is used for cleaning out the stove, fastened to the pole." The snowman had a stove scraper in his body. That was what moved him so. But it's all over. Away, away. And soon the winter passed. "Away, away," barked the hoarse yard dog. But the girls in the house sang, "Come from your fragrant home, green pine, stretch your soft branches, willow tree. The months are bringing the sweet springtime, when the lark in the sky sings joyfully. Come, gentle sun, while the cuckoo sing, and I'll milk his nose in my wandering." And nobody thought anymore of the snowman. Ya, so tadi itu dongeng. Bentar, Meru minum dulu. Jadi tadi itu dongengnya tentang jadi ada satu orang-orangan salju. Ya, Meru minum kok, Meru minum. Ada satu orang-orangan salju yang dia itu kayak dibangun di luar rumah kan. Lalu excuse me. Jadi dia dibangun di luar rumah dan dia itu bisa kayak ngobrol gitu sama ada anjing di depan rumahnya gitu. Terus waktu dia ditanyain kenapa kok kamu di luar, karena anjingnya tuh sebelumnya nakal, jadi nggak dibolehin masuk gitu. Terus waktu dia cerita anjingnya kalau di dalam itu ada kompor dan dan dia cerita kalau dia tuh suka berbaring di bawah kompornya gitu. Terus habis itu orang-orangan saljunya tuh dia kayak ngerasa sesuatu di dalam dia, dan begitu waktu berlalu, orang-orang saljunya tuh perlahan mulai meleleh, terus meleleh, dan akhirnya ternyata di dalamnya orang-orangan saljunya itu ada Meru nggak tahu bahasa Indonesianya apa, cuman itu kayak sekop yang dipakai buat bersihin kompornya. Makanya memang orang-orang saljunya itu dibangun dari sesuatu yang membantu kompornya itu. Dan sayangnya orang-orang saljunya ya meleleh dan ya shuffle. Apa nama dongengnya? Nama dongengnya itu The Snowman. Ini dongeng yang ditulis oleh Hans Christian Andersen. Mungkin kalian lebih familiar sama ceritanya yang diangkat jadi film. Dia yang nulis dasar dongengnya Frozen. Ya, orang-orang saljunya meleleh. Dari website. Ya, selamat datang yang baru datang. Kalau misalnya ngantuk, tidur, karena emang tujuannya Meru baca dongengnya kan biar kalian tidur. Film Frozen itu yang dongengnya awalnya itu Hans Christian Andersen itu yang nulis dongeng itu. Bukan, yang nulis dongeng The Snowman ini. Kalau misalnya kalian ngantuk tidur, Meru akan bacain satu dongeng lagi kok. Tidur ya. Memang Meru kan bacain cerita biar kalian tidur, kan udah malam. Ya. Ada yang baru bangun, astaga. Meru juga sebenarnya baru bangun sih, kata tadi tidur. Bukan Snowman yang ini sih, cuman ada ceritanya Hans Christian Andersen yang dibuat jadi film, yaitu jadi Frozen. Yes. Ya. Meru akan baca satu dongeng lagi. Judulnya, kalian kalau yang ini sih kayaknya harusnya tahu, ini pernah dibikin jadi film juga kok. Kali ini Meru akan bacain The Little Mermaid. Kalian tahu kan cerita film Disney-nya Little Mermaid? Ya, The Little Mermaid. Ya, jadi Meru akan bacain dongengnya itu sekarang. Sebentar, Meru mau cek sesuatu dulu ya. Iya, The Little Mermaid. Kalian nontonnya di apa sih? Di HP, di laptop? Ditaruh aja, sampai situ dengerin Meru aja, jangan liatin Meru. Ya, yang sudah mau tidur, selamat tidur, Yasumi. Oh, di PC, asik. Oke, Meru belum lagi dulu. Soalnya yang Little Mermaid lebih panjang lagi daripada yang Snowman. Bentar. Oke. Dongeng yang berikutnya adalah The Little Mermaid. Dongengnya tentang Putri Duyung dan apa yang dia ingin lakukan, apa yang bisa dia lakukan untuk cinta. Kenapa endingnya banyak yang tentang cinta-cinta ya? But Meru akan bacain ya. Selamat malam. Meru mau bacain dongeng ya. Ya, buat yang baru datang, selama Meru baca dongeng, Meru nggak akan lihat chat nggak akan baca donasi, jadi bakal fokus cuman ke baca dongengnya. Jadi kalau misalnya mau respon-respon bisa tunggu Meru selesai cerita dulu ya. Oke. Nggak kok, Meru kan masih break dulu. Ini mau bacain dongeng lagi. Sip. Oke. Okay. Far out in the ocean, where the water is as blue as the prettiest cornflower and as clear as crystal, it is very, very deep. So deep, indeed, that no cable could sound it, and many church steeples piled one upon another would not reach from the ground beneath to the surface of the water above. There dwell the Sea King and his subjects. We must not imagine that there is nothing at the bottom of the sea but bare yellow sand. No, indeed, for on this sand grow the strangest flowers and plants, the leaves and stems of which are so pliant that the slightest agitation of the water causes them to stir as if they had life. Fishes, both large and small, glide between the branches as birds fly among the trees here upon land. In the deepest spot of all stands the castle of the Sea King. Its walls are built of coral, and the long Gothic windows are of the clearest amber. The roof is formed of shells that open and close as the water flows over them. Their appearance is very beautiful, for in each lies a glittering pearl which would be fit for the diadem of a queen. The Sea King had been a widower for many years, and his aged mother kept house for him. He was a very sensible woman, but exceedingly proud of her high birth, and on that account wore 12 oysters on her tail, while others of high rank were only allowed to wear 6. She was, however, deserving of very great praise, especially for her care of the little sea princesses, her 6 granddaughters. They were beautiful children, but the youngest was the prettiest of them all. Her skin was as clear and delicate as a rose leaf, and her eyes as blue as the deepest sea. But like all the others, she had no feet, and her body ended in a fish tail. All day long they played in the great halls of the castle and among the living flowers that grew out of the walls. The large amber windows were open, and the fish swam in, just as the swallows fly into our houses when we open the windows. Only the fishes swam up to the princesses, ate out of their hands, and allowed themselves to be stroked. Outside the castle there was a beautiful garden, in which grew bright red and dark blue flowers, and blossomed like flames of fire. The fruits glittered like gold, and the leaves and stems waved to and fro continually. The earth itself was the finest sand, but blue as the flame of burning sulphur. Over everything lay a peculiar blue radiance, as if the blue sky were everywhere, above and below, instead of the dark depths of the sea. In calm weather the sun could be seen, looking like a reddish-purple flower, with light streaming from the calyx. Each of the young princesses had a little plot of the ground in the garden, where she might dig and plant as she pleased. One arranged her flower bed in the form of a whale, another preferred to make hers like the figure of a little mermaid, while the youngest child made hers look round, like the sun, and in it grew flowers as red as his rays at sunset. She was a strange child, quiet and thoughtful. While her sisters showed delight at the wonderful things which they obtained from the wrecks of vessels, she cared only for her pretty flowers, red like the sun, and a beautiful marble statue. It was the representation of a handsome boy, carved out of pure white stone, which had fallen to the bottom of the sea from a wreck. She planted by the statue a rose-colored weeping willow. It grew rapidly and soon hung its fresh branches over the statue, almost down to the blue sands. The shadows had the color of violet and waved to and fro like the branches, so that it seemed as if the crown of the tree and the root were at play, trying to kiss each other. Nothing gave her so much pleasure as to hear about the world above the sea. She made her old grandmother tell her all she knew of the ships and of the town, the people and the animals. To her, it seems most wonderful and beautiful to hear that the flowers of the land had fragrance, while those below the sea had none, that the trees of the forest were green, and that the fishes among the trees could sing so sweetly that it was a pleasure to listen to them. Her grandmother called the birds fishes, or the little mermaid would not have understood what it meant, for she had never seen birds. "When you have reached your 15th year," said the grandmother, "you will have permission to rise up out of the sea and sit on the rocks in the moonlight while the great ships go sailing by. Then you will see both forests and towns." In the following year, one of the sisters would be 15, but as each was a year younger than the other, the youngest would have to wait 5 years before her turn came to rise up from the bottom of the ocean to see the earth as we do. However, each promised to tell the others what she saw on her first visit and what she thought was most beautiful. Their grandmother could not tell them enough. There were so many things about which they wanted to know. None of them longed so much for her turn to come as the youngest, she who had the longest time to wait and who was so quiet and thoughtful. Many nights she stood by the open window, looking up through the dark blue water and watching the fish as they splashed about with their fins and tails. She could see the moon and stars shining faintly, but through the water they looked larger than they do to our eyes. When something like a black cloud passed between her and them, she knew that it was either a whale swimming over her head or a ship full of human beings who never imagined that a pretty little mermaid was standing beneath them, holding out her white hands toward the keel of their ship. At length, the eldest was 15 and was allowed to rise up to the surface of the ocean. When she had returned, she had hundreds of things to talk about, but the finest thing she said was to lie. Apakah tadi ke disconnect? Apakah sudah kembali? Back, it's back, okay. Meru juga nggak tahu. Meru lanjutin ya. Oke. Tadi sampai mana? Oke. But the finest thing, she said, was to lie on a sandbank in the quiet moonlight sea, near the shore, gazing at the lights of the nearby town that twinkled like hundreds of stars, and listening to the sounds of music, the noise of carriage, the voices of human beings, and the merry pealing of the bells in the church steeples. Because she could not go near all these wonderful things, she longed for them all the more. Oh, how eagerly did the youngest sister listen to all these descriptions! And afterward, when she stood at the open window looking up through the dark blue water, she thought of the great city, with all its bustle and noise, and even fancied she could hear the sound of the church bells down in the depths of the sea. In another year, the second sister received permission to rise to the surface of the water and to swim about where she pleased. She rose just as the sun was setting, and this, she said, was the most beautiful sight of all. The whole sky looked like gold and violet and rose-colored clouds, which she could not describe, drifted across it, and more swiftly than the clouds flew a large flock of wild swans toward the setting sun, like a long white veil across the sea. She also swam towards the sun, but it sank into the waves, and the rosy tints faded from the clouds and from the sea. The third sister's turn followed, and she was the boldest of them all, for she swam up the broad river that emptied into the sea. On the bank she saw green hills covered in beautiful vines, and palaces and castles peeping out from amid the beautiful trees of the forest. She heard birds singing and felt the rays of the sun so strongly that she was obliged often to dive under the water to cool her burning face. In a narrow creek, she found a large group of little human children, almost naked, sporting about in the water. She wanted to play with them, but they fled in a great fright. And then a little black animal, it was a dog, but she didn't know it, for she had never seen one before, came to the water and barked at her so fiercely that she became frightened and rushed back into the open sea. But she said she should never forget the beautiful forest, the green hills, and the pretty children who could swim in the water although they had no tails. The fourth sister was more timid. She remained in the midst of the sea, but said it was quite as beautiful there as nearer the land. She could see many miles around her, and the sky above looked like a bell of glass. She had seen the ships, but at such a great distance that they looked like sea seagulls. The dolphins sported in the waves, and the great whales spouted water from their nostrils until it seemed as if 100 fountains were playing in every direction. The fifth sister occurred in the winter, so that when her turn came, she saw what the others had not seen the first time they went up. The sea looked quite green, and large icebergs were floating about, each like a pearl, she said, but larger and loftier than the churches built by men. They were the most singular shapes and glittered like diamonds. She had seated herself on one of the largest and let the wind play with her long hair. She noticed that all the ships sailed past very rapidly, steering as far as they could, as if they were afraid of the iceberg. Towards evening, as the sun went down, dark clouds covered the sky, the thunder rolled, and the flashes of lightning glowed red on the iceberg as they were tossed about by the heaving sea. On all the ships, the sails were reefed with fear and trembling, while she sat on the floating iceberg, calmly watching the lightning as it darted its fork flashes into the sea. Each of the sisters, when first she had permission to rise to the surface, was delighted with the new and beautiful sights. Now that they were grown-up girls and could go when they pleased, they had become quite indifferent about it. They soon wished themselves back again, and after a month had passed, they said it was much more beautiful down below and pleasanter to be at home. Sebentar ya. Yet often in the evening hours, the five sisters would twine their arms about each other and rise to the surface together. Their voices were more charming than that of the human being, and before the approach of a storm, when they feared a ship might be lost, they swam before the vessel, singing enchanting songs of delights to be found in the depths of the sea, and begging the voyagers not to fear if they sank to the bottom. But the sailors could not understand the song, and thought it was the sigh of the storm. These things were never beautiful to them, for if the ship sank, the men were drowned, and their dead bodies alone reached the palace of the Sea King. When the sister arose arm in arm through the water, their youngest sister would stand quite alone, looking after them, ready to cry. Only, since mermaids have no tears, she suffered more acutely. "Oh, were I but 15 years old," said she, "I know that I shall love the world up there, and all the people who live in it." At last she reached her 15th year. "Well, now you are grown up," said the old dowager, her grandmother. "Come and let me adorn you like your sisters." And she placed her in her hair a wreath of white lilies, of which every flower leaf was half a pearl. Then the old lady ordered 8 great oysters to attach themselves to the tail of the princess to show her high rank. "But they hurt me so," said the little mermaid. "Yes, I know. Pride must suffer pain," replied the old lady. Oh, how gladly she would have shaken off all this grandeur and laid aside the heavy wrath. The red flower in her own garden would suit her much better. But she could not change herself, so she said farewell and rose as lightly as a bubble to the surface of the water. The sun had just set when she raised her head above the waves. The clouds were tinted with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight beamed the evening star in all its beauty. The sea was calm, and the air mild and fresh. A large ship with 3 masts lay becalmed on the water. Only one sail was set, for not a breeze stirred, and the sailors sat idle on deck or amidst the rigging. There were music and song on board, and as darkness came on, 100 colored lanterns were lighted, as if the flags of all nations waved in the air. The little mermaid swam close to the cabin windows, and then, as the waves lift her up, she could see in through glass window panes and see a number of gaily dressed people. And among them, and the most beautiful of all, was a young prince with large black eyes. He was 16 years of age, and his birthday was being celebrated with great display. The sailors were dancing on deck, and when the prince came out of the cabin, more than 100 rockets rose in the air, making it as bright as day. The little mermaid was so startled that she dived underwater, and when she again stretched out her head, it looked as if the stars of heaven were falling around her. She had never seen such fireworks before. Great suns spurted fire about, splendid fireflies flew into the blue air, and everything was reflected in the air calm sea beneath. The ship itself was so brightly illuminated that all the people, even the smallest rope, could be distinctly seen. Sebentar. Selamat datang. Maaf Meru tadi nggak sengaja lihat chat. Tadi Meru bacanya sampai mana? Oh no. Okay. And even the smallest rope could be distinctly seen. How handsome the young prince looked as he pressed the hands of all his guests and smiled at them while the music resounded through the clear night air. Sebentar, Meru minum dulu. Yang sudah mau tidur, selamat tidur. Meru ingatkan lagi, Meru bakal jarang banget buka chat, jadi maaf kalau misalnya ada yang chatnya ketinggalan ya. Meru gak hafal ceritanya. Meru kapan-kapan aja ya. Ya, Ayasumi yang mau tidur, Ayasumi. Kalau nggak bisa donate, nggak apa-apa. Donasi akan, kalau misalnya ada donasi, Meru akan baca di akhir ya. It was very late, yet the little mermaid could not take her eyes from the ship or from the beautiful prince. The cold lanterns had been extinguished, no more rockets rose in the air, and the cannon had ceased firing. But the sea became restless, and a moaning, rumbling sound could be heard beneath the waves. Still, the little mermaid remained by the cabin window, rocking up and down on the water so that she could look within. After a while, the sails were quickly set, and the ship went on her way. Terima kasih donasinya, Meru baca nanti ya. And after a while, the sails were quickly set, and the ship went on her way. But soon the waves rose higher, heavy clouds darkened the sky, and lightning appeared in the distance. A dreadful storm was approaching. Once more the sails were furled, and the great ship pursued her flying course over the raging sea. The waves rose mountain high, as if they would overtop the mast. Terima kasih donasinya, Meru baca nanti ya. The waves, but the ship dived like a swan between them, then rose again on their lofty foaming crest. To the little mermaid this was pleasant sport, but not so to the sailors. At length, the ship groaned and creaked. The thick planks gave way under the lashing of the sea as the waves broke over the deck. The mainmast snapped asunder like a reed, and as the ship lay over on her side, the water rushed in. The little mermaid now perceived that the crew were in danger. Even she was obliged to be careful to avoid the beams and planks of the wreck which lay scattered on the water. At one moment, it was pitch dark, so that she could not see a single object. But when a flash of lightning came, it revealed the whole scene. She could see everyone who had been on board except the prince. When the ship parted, she had seen him sink into the deep waves, and she was glad, for she thought she would now be with her. Then she remembered that human beings could not live in the water, so that when she got down to her father's palace, he would certainly be quite dead. No, he must not die. So she swam about among the beams and planks which strewed the surface of the sea, forgetting that they could crush her into pieces. Diving deep under the dark waters, rising and falling with the waves, she at length managed to reach the young prince, who was fast losing the power to swim in that stormy sea. His limbs were failing him. His beautiful eyes were closed, and he would have died had not the little mermaid came to his assistance. She held his head above the water and let the waves carry them where they would. In the morning, the storm had ceased, but of the ship not a single fragment could be seen. The sun came up and shining out of the water, and its beam brought back the hue of health to the prince's cheek, but his eyes remained closed. The mermaid kissed his high, smooth forehead and stroked back his wet hair. He seemed to her like the marble statue in her little garden, so she kissed him and wished that he might live. Ceritanya masih panjang ternyata, dan suara Meru udah mau habis. Jadi kayaknya Meru hentikan dulu baca ceritanya di situ. Ya, Meru udah mulai serak, jadi kayaknya udah mulai serak, jadi bakal Meru simpan. Mungkin Meru besok akan gerila dan lanjutin baca. Meru tempat minum kok. Bentar ya, Meru baca donasi ya. Iya, Little Mermaid memang panjang, jadi Meru agak kaget. Tadi di tulisannya itu bilangnya katanya bacanya butuh 15 menit aja, tapi kayaknya tadi itu lebih dari 15 menit deh. Sebentar, tadi donasi. Mana tadi? There we go. Tadi dari Meru habis ini tidur kok. Meru sendiri juga nggak tahu sih bakal tidur atau enggak, soalnya Meru dari tadi jam berapa ya? Meru itu tadi kemarin malam itu tidurnya tengah malam. Terus habis itu bangun jam 6-an gitu kan. Terus habis itu sebentar, kaki Meru sakit. Terus habis itu waktu kebangun jam 6, terus habis itu Meru kayak bangun Terus habis itu ketiduran lagi jam 10 sampai jam berapa itu tadi? Jam 1, terus bangun lagi, terus jam 3 tidur lagi, terus habis itu bangun lagi, terus tidur lagi. Terus jadi tadi itu sebenarnya sebelum live Meru sempat ketiduran. Iya, tadi kemarin kalau misalnya kalian nggak follow space, nggak follow Twitter Meru kemarin sempat space tengah malam juga. It was fun. Subuh sih. Meru ketiduran sambil dengerin space-nya orang sebenarnya kemarin. Ya, kalau misalnya Meru lagi mood, Meru akan kadang-kadang space gitu. Ya Meru. Jangan sering begadang. Meru bukan pengennya begadang sih, lebih tepatnya jam tidur Meru berantakan. Jadi nggak bisa tidur jam normal. Tadi dari Kelvin. Meru aku datang, aku kangen sama kamu, mau dengar suara kamu, mau lihat manisnya wajah kamu. Ya Meru di sini. Terus dari Lutfi Halimawan, tadi Meru lihat sama datang Bang Lutfi. Nanti aku request cerita tangkuban perahu ya kak. Oh bisa sih. Next session mungkin Meru bacain dongeng-dongeng Indonesia gitu ya. Terus dari seseorang, The Real TRT Turu. Ya. Arigato donasinya semuanya. Kaesang, sebentar. There we go. Selamat datang Kaesang. Besok kah? Besok kah? Meru lihat dulu ya. Mau besok atau minggu depan. Good evening. Meru udah live berapa lama? Udah 1 jam ish. Iya, kalian juga jangan lupa tidur ya. Iya, tidur ya. Ya, Meru jaga kesehatan kok. Tadi sekarang Meru lagi minum teh. Tadi ditanyain minum teh apakah hari ini udah minum teh. Ini sekarang Meru lagi minum green tea sama honey. Terus sama ada lemonnya juga. Udah ngantuk, bagus. Nggak kok, Meru nggak maksa. Kalian yang kalau udah malam gini tidur. Oke, karena I think udah mulai ngantuk belum. Meru beneran baru bangun, jadi belum bisa tidur. Habis ini tidur, bagus. Yes, tidur ya. Arigato donasinya Kelvin-san. Meru semangatin aku dong, besok soalnya aku mau presentasi tentang proyek aku sama investor besar. Doakan aku semoga berhasil menyelesaikan presentasi aku dengan baik. Semangat, semoga sukses ya besok. Apakah stress tengah malam lagi? Nggak tahu. Boleh nggak baca The Ant and the Grasshopper? Nanti Meru lihat dulu ya. Nggak hari ini, tapi Meru bisa masukin ke list dongeng yang bisa Meru bacain. Live-nya sampai jam berapa? Bentar lagi kayaknya Meru mau selesai. Tadi bacain dongeng 1 jam, kayaknya kurang lebih. Yes. Ya. Meru bukan lagi nggak fit, cuman tadi sebelum stream Meru habis selesai recording buat cover. Jadi mungkin kami itu ya, jadi suara Meru agak habis gitu. Nggak apa-apa Meru, nggak apa-apa kok, beneran. Kalian nggak usah khawatir ya. Yes? Jawab. Dari Vivi-san, hai Meru, salam dari alam mimpi. Wow. Iya, Meru cover. Kemarin habis rekaman fullnya, terus tadi rekaman harmo. Jadi mungkin karena itu jadi suara Meru agak habis sekarang. Ditunggu aja ya. Untuk lagunya apa, ditunggu aja. Meru nggak mau kasih spoiler. Yes, kalian juga ya, stay safe, jangan lupa jaga kesehatan. Apalagi ya, jangan lupa jaga kesehatan, makan yang benar, minum yang benar, jam tidurnya juga jangan kayak Meru. Nggak ngantuk kah Meru? Belum. The Frog Princess, Meru catat ya. Nggak bakal baca sekarang sih, soalnya suara Meru udah mau habis. ya mau kalau misal bakal ada bedtime stories reading stream kayak gini lagi, arigato donasinya. Meru akan streamnya malam-malam kayak gini, jadi maaf kalau buat beberapa buat kalian it's too late, tapi tujuannya kan biar kalian tidur, jadi ya harus malam gitu. Bentar, Meru baca donasi dulu. Meru, aku mau tanya kamu, ini terlalu lemah lembut. Penasaran kalau marah itu seperti apa kamu Meru? Apakah kamu tidak pernah selama hidup kamu? Actually Meru orangnya sebenarnya gampang marah sih. Percaya atau enggak? Meru gampang ngambek, gampang kesel. Cuma Meru sembunyiinnya gampang, dan kelihatannya kayak kalau enggak gimana ya, Meru enggak akan terlalu jago. I cannot imagine this baby angry. What do you mean? Meru sebenarnya bisa marah kok, cuman marah Meru tuh bukan tipe marah yang kayak meledak terus banting meja DLL ya gitu sih. Meru marahnya tambah diem. Jadi ya diem aja. Jadi nggak kelihatan banget sebenarnya. Kenapa pada enggak, Meru kalau marah nggak imut beneran. Meru nggak pernah marah sama Star Yume kok. Ya GBS yang pengen dimarahin. Meru nggak itu marahnya bener-bener bukan marah yang meledak-ledak itu. Dulu banget sih mungkin, tapi nggak sekarang. Arigato donasinya, sebentar ya. Meru coba dah acting. Kalau kamu marah itu seperti apa sih? Kalau aku jadi penasaran banget lihat karakter kamu ini. Coba sekali aja marahnya gimana? Gimana ya? Oke, sebentar. Meru pengen stream ini jadi stream yang kalem aja. Jadi Meru bakal ganti stream aja gitu. Kita terus lanjut free talk di sana ya. Meru buka streamnya sebentar. Oke. See you in a bit. Meru pilih stream dulu. Oke, bentar ya.